Hello, this is video 3 of a 3-part series on Blackboard tests. This video will cover the important export functions, which can create copies of a test from one course into another, and reusing test questions. So let's begin by exporting the test that we created in the earlier video and importing it into a course. We're going to start by going to Course Tools in our Control panel, Test Pools and Surveys, and going to the test area. We can see our previously created Quiz 1 here. We're going to select from the drop-down arrow of Quiz 1, Export to a local computer, and we'll see a File Save dialog box. What we want to do is make sure we know where we've saved this file, because we'll need it later when we import the test into a different course. So we'll go ahead and click Save, and we can see our test is saving into the area where we selected. So now we're going to pretend as though we had gone into a different course and we followed that same navigation in our control panel, Course Tools, Test Pools, Surveys, Tests, and now we're ready to import the test. And you'll notice there's the Import Test button next to our Build Test. So we'll click Import, we'll click Browse My Computer, and this is why we wanted to remember where we had saved that file, because we're going to need to retrieve it to import it. Here it is. We select the file and click Open. You can see that the file is now attached. Click Submit, and it will take a couple of moments, and then you will see the message that the file has been processed and the import is complete. Click OK, and you'll see there's our copy, and it has the same exact name as the test that we exported. So if you have multiple tests with the same name, again, I do encourage good naming conventions so that you don't have several tests with the same names, because that can get confusing. A couple of things that can help you is if you look under the deployed column, we can see this is the one that we've just brought in because it is not deployed, and this one is deployed into our content area. Also, they are date and time stamped, so we can see that this is the test that we just brought in just a moment ago by the timestamp there. And that's really all there is to exporting and importing tests from one course into another. It's a really helpful feature if you're teaching several sections of the same course. You can build that test in just one of those courses and then export it and import it into all the rest of your sections, so you don't have to recreate it each time. It's very, very helpful. Okay, another helpful option in Blackboard is reusing your test questions. So just so we don't get confused, I'm going to go ahead and delete the test that we just brought in because we don't need two of those. If we had several quizzes and then we wanted a larger unit exam, so let's go ahead and build a test, and we'll look at reusing questions from our quizzes on our unit exam. So we'll call this a unit exam 1. And this process, until we get to the test canvas, is exactly the same as creating a test was in video 1. We have our description box and our instruction box with the full text editor. Click Submit. And here we are at our test canvas for Unit 1 exam, or Unit Exam 1. So we don't have any questions. We can create questions, but we can also reuse questions, and we're going to use the reuse find question function, and that will bring up a dialog box which will give you two different options: a link to the original question or a copy of the original question. Copy is the more stable option, especially if you're doing course copies of your entire course from semester to semester. Those links are more apt to break. They're fairly stable, but just to be on the safe side, we'll just copy that question into the test. So we'll click Continue, and you'll see a dialog box which gives you several different criteria for selecting which questions you want to reuse. You can select questions from a pool. We don't have any pools in this course, and there are other videos that deal with that. Pools are just groups of questions that aren't attached to a test, but all of our questions are attached to a test. So we can select questions from only quiz 1. So if we only want to reuse questions from quiz 1, we can do so. Or if we want all questions from quiz 1 and quiz 2, and you can see this is the source name right here, so we can tell where those questions are coming from and how many points that they're they are worth, which we can change once we've added the copy of them to this question or to this test. So I'm going to select a couple. I'm going to select one from quiz 1 and one from quiz 2. Once I've made my selection, also you can see question types. So if we wanted just essay questions or we wanted just multiple choice questions, we can narrow the field of questions by type. Those categories, topics, level of difficulty, and keywords that we mentioned when we were creating test questions are all options that we can filter by here too. We didn't use any of those filters, so we're just going to select these 2 questions and click submit. And now you will see we have a copy of each of those questions. One is our essay question from quiz 1 and the other is a matching question from quiz 2. So we have our questions here, and again we can set the value by selecting all of the questions or the individual questions that we want and updating the points on those, just as we could when we created an original test. So now that's just an easy way to copy questions from a previous test into a new test. So if you have several quizzes, you don't have to retype those questions in order to reuse them on a larger unit exam. So that is reusing questions and exporting and importing. Very simple functions for tests in Blackboard that can be very helpful.